Hey guys, how are you? It has been like forever. Everybody else has been just hogging the time, man. I haven't seen anybody for ages. So, I have a video this week. Yeah, about time. I mean, the last thing that I brought you was the Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That's the last thing I brought you. The thingy of a death foretold. Yeah, that's the last thing I brought you. I'm bringing you another magical realist book, or in this case, known as, the author called it marvelous realism. It's the same thing. It's just that this one is sort of the granddaddy. But before we get to our book, remember there is our shop, where if you want to support us, where we have books and writing services. We put out 4 books this year. There is our Redbubble shop, where there's over 100 designs. You can support us there. So Christmas is coming up. Remember also, if you don't want to spend any money, that's cool. Just like, subscribe, comment, share. We love that. It really helps. So, right, we're all going to be cool, aren't we? We're all going to be cool, and I'm going to try to pronounce Spanish names. Yeah, because that'll work really well. Give me a good German name. Anyway, our book this week is Alejo Carpentier's The Kingdom of This World. Now, Carpentier was a Cuban writer, and this book is really the first piece of magical realist literature. This one is the granddaddy. Now, I know you're going to say, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, what about Jorge Luis Borges? What about him? I thought he was. Yes, but Jorge Luis Borges wrote short stories. Alejo Carpentier has written novels. We actually have a couple of these. I have a couple of these on my shelf. I have this whole shelf with a ton of Spanish and Portuguese speaking American writers, so Central and South American writers. So I have a ton of these writers. Notice I don't do a lot of North Americans. Yeah. But we are looking at the Spanish-speaking world and Portuguese-speaking world. There is a Brazilian in there. But this time we're having a look at this. This is the book that really started the boom, that started out the interest in Latin American writing, and that gave Latin American writing its particularly distinct voice that you see throughout the 20th century, from the mid-century onwards. Now, this book, The Kingdom of This World, is about the Haitian Rebellion, the Haitian Revolution, where the island of Haiti gained independence of the colonial overlords. It was a slave revolt. So Haiti became the first independent former slave colony, where they threw the white colonialists out of the country and kept it for themselves. So historically, it's a very, very important place in time to look at this. So this story is telling that story. Now, I would say anybody who is still confused and thinking, oh no, magical realism is a variety of fantasy, read this. This is what you actually need to read. If you have read some Gabriel Garcia Marquez and you are sort of, oh, I'm not too certain if this is fantasy or if this is reality. This makes it abundantly clear that it is not a form of fantasy. So, what's going on with this book? It's a really thin little book. Carpentier spent time in Haiti, an extended time in Haiti, before writing this book, and he chose the mode of his writing based upon his experience of Haitian culture. Okay, so he's not imposing this from outside. The preface to this book, he explains how and why he's writing like this. Now, this is also distinct. He is making a very strong distinction from this being surrealism, which he says is a European idea and that is played out. That European tropes will not work in South and Central America. Why? Because European tropes are rational. He sees the surrealists as taking the imagery that they create is sort of almost expected. It's like, oh, it's like they're playing on a board game, and the pieces are just moving in the way that the culture is already dictating. That there is the cultural norms of Europe are played out. So this is not a surreal novel. And it actually doesn't read as a surreal novel either. What this is, why he developed what he called marvelous realism, magical realism, is to be able to engage with the cultural phenomenon of his part of the world. Cuba, Haiti, the whole of the Spanish and Portuguese speaking part of the continent. He felt that you needed a new kind of language to engage with the particular mixture of European, of African, and of indigenous views and voices to create that a unique style for the country. That this is a country or a place, a continent that is not easy for a European mode to describe, and therefore you need this hybrid mode. So that's why Carpentier created this, and it's why it is not fantasy. Now, this story takes place over the entirety of the revolution, which it's taking place over roughly a 15 year period, perhaps even longer, definitely longer. So it's taking the revolution itself took place over about a 15 year period, but the actual narrative is taking place across a lifetime of the man Tia Noel, who is a young slave who is witnessing. He starts out a young slave and ends up an old man, but he is witnessing the revolution. He is witnessing the slave revolts. He is witnessing these things, and he is our eyes into this. His master is also a character, though less well drawn. He is more or less a representative of the white French colonialist landowning, people-owning class, and how they are reacting to this extraordinary event. So all the events in this are historical. The events are historical, but it's the perception of the events that render them marvelous. And it's the perspective that allows them to be marvelous. What you get in this is there is some extraordinary violence in this, as you can imagine. The big part where the magic side of this comes from is from the voodoo priestesses, the voodoo magic invoked by the rebellious slaves, the voodoo magic that is used to spook and frighten the slave owning class, the voodoo magic that then provokes the violence and then again creates these cycles of violence, which I will talk about. But because the magic is something that the characters believe in, they are seeing it so that the characters believe that this man who is on the lam is returning and keeping an eye on things in the form of various different animals. He is coming and they are just waiting for that moment when he will return in human form. But he is keeping tabs on everything. Tell this story in a straight manner and you have a fairly, while an interesting story, a straight history of this is far less capturing a mood and a vibe. That's what this is so good at. It captures the use of the marvelous, the use of the magic. It captures the uncertainty and the shocking nature of the events. Because obviously bystanders are not in on the entire plot. They are witnessing events. They are witnessing the poisoning of the animals. They are witnessing the poisoning of the white families. They are witnessing and rejoicing in someone from their world having one up on the people who are enslaving them. Of course, what is actually happening, and it's very clear what is actually happening, is that there is a systematic poisoning covertly occurring through a whole network of slaves who are poisoning the families in which they are owned. It's nothing particularly magical that is actually happening in a straight history, but from an outsider view, and an outsider view with with these particular cultural and religious beliefs, this is magical. This is amazing that all of a sudden the power of these people who have life and death over you are suddenly falling victim to strange, unknowable poisonings, death that are frightening them and that they are finding inexplicable and that they are becoming superstitious about. So it becomes, this is a battle of our gods against your gods. So there is a lot of the marvelous is this inversion of power. But we're seeing this, not this inversion of power from the white perspective. We're seeing the inversion of power from the black perspective and seeing how they are interpreting this. So yes, from their perspective, from their understanding of power, and that the power is not a power of necessarily organization and guns and conspiracy, which it is. It's using the same sorts of tools that the oppressor would use, but it's been filtered down through a story of magic and voodoo, because that is how they're understanding that. It's not a case of that this is happening by magic. It's that it is marvelous and amazing that this is happening at all, that we are explaining it in this manner. So logically, are we going to say that the one-armed runaway slave is actually transforming himself? No, but this is the world we are drawn into, where we believe this, where this is what gives these people hope to carry on. The rebellion continues. The poisonings end with the capture of the leader of that, and this provokes again retaliatory violence, because that is another point of this book, is that violence will beget violence will beget violence in a constant cycle of revenge and a cycle of reaction. That the reaction of the slaves to their enslavement is violence towards the white enslavers. The reaction of the white enslavers towards the violence of the slaves is violence towards the slaves. It's backwards and forwards, and it's stuck in this cycle of reacting to one violent thing after another with more violence. There is an element to which this revolution is seen to fail because it traps its people. It traps the people into a cycle of violence. When Henry Christophe, the king, the Black King of Haiti, recreates the same system of oppression, the same system of abuse that the white administrators had created, but merely doing that so that it's black on black violence, black on black oppression, not an egalitarian, not a everyone is free, but I have adopted the ways of the Europeans, and the ways of the Europeans involves the oppression of my fellow people. This then causes another reaction, a rebellion, and that causes a further wave of violence. So you see, because the revolution has not enacted a change, it has just put a new person on top, and then it changes, and then they get tired of that level and react against. So it's a lack of actual revolution. There is no freedom in this. There is no freedom without changing the paradigm. Tia Noel eventually seeks to gain freedom by transforming himself into a goose, but discovers that the other geese are not going to accept him. He transforms himself to avoid people, to avoid being under someone else, because being an animal of some kind is to avoid being under someone else, until he discovers that even within the animal world there are hierarchies, there is ostracism. He discovers being an ant, you get annoyed, you don't have freedom as an ant. You don't have freedom in a great many different guises. That freedom as isolation doesn't really exist, not in the way that he thinks. But at the same time, that's part of the point of it is that he is not able to break free of his old paradigm of having been a slave. He very easily steps back into the role of the oppressed or the oppressor, because the violence that the characters enact is again a reaction to the violence that is enacted on them. So they are more than willing to be violent to another, to take things from another, because there is no paradigm for a different way of being. Only a slaveholder fears becoming a slave. And that's the thing is that you see in this book, is that the slaves and former slaves and the slaveholders are locked into this dynamic of one or the other, and flipping backwards and forwards, because they haven't worked out how to break that. And it's only by breaking that dynamic that they can actually create freedom for themselves. So the magical elements of this are what give this an extraordinary dreamscape quality. It's what allows this 130-page book to tell a huge, massive story without delving into, distorting events in terms of trying to create a narrative out of them. The narrative is there. The events of the Haitian Rebellion and Revolution are there, but they are told to us filtered through a very particular perspective, and it's a perspective that is not going to understand political nuance. It is not a perspective that is going to understand how things are actually enacted, but it is one that understands how these things are impacting them. So it is an incredibly fascinating book. It's one you can read fairly quickly. The way that it is written is what makes this, I think, such a readable book. It could have the potential, if written in a very European manner, to be plotting, to be overly pedantic, to be that thing which I always hate, which is putting grand speeches into mouths, and you just watch that and you think, oh Lord, think like Ridley Scott, any historical Ridley Scott movie. Lordy. Those sorts of speeches, you know the ones I mean. That sort of thing would not serve this story well, because that sort of story requires heroes and villains. And that's the other thing. You don't get heroes and villains. You get people struggling to understand how to create something new while locked into an old paradigm that they don't even recognize that they're locked into. People aren't heroes or villains. People are people struggling to create something that they don't know what it is that they wish to create, but they know that they want something that's different to what they have before, but they're trapped within that paradigm. So yes, people do heinous things. Yes, no one in this is morally pure. But at the same time, that's a strength to this. There isn't that moral judgment on, is this good or is this bad? It's not about good and bad. It's about, how do you break free when the paradigm that you have lived in no longer serves you? How long does that reactionary violence continue? And how do you have a revolution that is revolutionary? What you have in this novel is Haiti has had a violent overthrow of a government. It has had a reaction to the brutality of slavery, but it hasn't had a revolution until the mindset of the slave is replaced by something new. Not the mindset of the oppressor, but the mindset of somebody who is free. And that's what it's grappling with. As grappling with that in a language that is unique to this part of the world. And it is a language that Latin American authors picked up and ran with, because it gave them a language to express what they wanted to express. Magical realism is a language of trauma. It is a language of trauma, and it comes. You see that so very much. It is a language of trying to make comprehensible things that are not comprehensible, trying to impose some sort of order on things that are orderless by people who are powerless. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes this really, really fascinating. Now, this is a shared topic. Her Ladyship will be bringing an actual account from the Haitian rebellion, revolution, in her next video. I'm going to actually have a bit of a break from magical realist writers, just for a little bit. I don't want to read only the same things over, like, in a row. I have other authors that I would like to have a look at. So I'm thinking it might be another Aleister Gray. I have some Aleister Gray. I really like Aleister Gray. So I'm thinking next time we might bring in Aleister Gray, and then we'll get back to our magical realist writers. But Aleister Gray, I think, will be our next author. I'm not sure which one. I've got quite a few Aleister Grays, but I think we'll have a little detour to Scotland, and I do very much recommend this. It really helps you understand why we are refusing to let this be called fantasy. It isn't fantasy. It's doing something far more complicated than, oh look, magic. Marvelous realism, if that helps you understand this better as a concept, if magical becomes a little too confusing, marvelous realism is also a legitimate term to use in this area. So perhaps that helps to demystify this as a literary form. So anyway, that is The Kingdom of This World, which I highly recommend. And I will see you guys again later on with, I think, some Aleister Gray. So until then, peace and love, guys. Peace and love. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.